From BBC Radio 4, this is Things Fell Apart, Season 2. In 1919, as the Spanish flu coursed through a world still broken by the Great War, Yeats wrote his poem, The Second Coming. Things fall apart, the centre cannot hold. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. 100 years later, and we were hit by our own pandemic, forcing us into lockdown. Suddenly, politicians were curtailing our freedoms in ways that most of us had never known. And so a new culture war erupted between safety and freedom, those who trusted science and those suspicious of government control. This story is about a young man who didn't trust authority, and because of it became embroiled in one of lockdown's most bizarre and shocking incidents.
Tonight, our Target 8 investigators zero in on the timeline of terror.
Across the state, a state of shock.
It's just unimaginable.
It's a shocking story, but the details of that story are even worse than that. They are beyond belief.
We lived in, pretty kind of like a lower middle class type of environment. It was kind of in a rural area.
This is Brandon Caserta, 35, from Michigan. When Brandon was 4, his truck driver father broke his back, and 12 years later, he died from an overdose of his pain medication.
It might have been accidental, I don't know, but my stepdad, he drove for all different sorts of trucking companies and still does that.
Brandon hated school. He didn't like being told what to do. When he left school, he just bummed around without purpose, blaming everyone else for his problems.
And then I realized, hey, maybe it's me. Maybe the reason why my life sucks right now is because I suck.
And so in 2018, Brandon decided to improve himself. And in that spirit, he discovered an author who shook him awake.
What advice do you have for a young man in his 20s?
Jordan Peterson, being interviewed here by his daughter, Michaela.
Make a plan. Get disciplined about something. Allow for the possibility that you have something important to contribute to the world.
So were you being too schlubby back then, getting stoned and keeping things untidy, and that was leading to lack of self-respect?
Yeah, I kind of feel like I was a weak coward. A specific dynamic in my life that he helped me with was self-love and strength. Strength and courage to, as he would say, fight the dragon.
After reading Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life, Brandon got a job as a machinist, making pistons that went into steering columns for Ford trucks.
That was the best my life has ever been. I decided to kind of get back into the dating game, and start talking to some ladies, and that was going good. And after I read 12 Rules for Life, I started reading a lot more.
He read anarchist and libertarian philosophy books. His suspicions about the elites simmered for a while without shape. Until... Let's go to March 2020, when suddenly there's talk of these cruise ships and everybody on the cruise ship has got sick, and there's these care homes and everyone's dying in these care homes. Did you feel we got to stay home until we can figure out what's going on here?
I was immediately suspicious from the beginning. I knew that something was going on when I went to Walmart and they had taped up the gardening area and you couldn't buy seeds. And it was springtime. And I'm like, wow, man, this is absolutely ridiculous.
Stay at home is what you need to know. The coronavirus does top our news this noon.
The governor's essentially telling everybody who isn't an essential employee to be home.
So Michigan was much more draconian than a lot of other states.
This is Matthew Schneider, who until 2021 was the U.S. Attorney for Eastern Michigan.
And the way that it was done in Michigan, a lot of people felt that it was strange and arbitrary. For example, the governor passed rules that said you could buy cereal, but you couldn't walk into the other aisle and buy paint supplies. And people felt that I'm forced to be at home. This would be a great opportunity for me to paint my kitchen. And the governor is not allowing me to do that, and it doesn't make sense. And of course, this is at the very beginning of the pandemic, and there's a lot of confusion, but it certainly caused for unrest.
Essentially, what I started doing was prepping, buying more storageable food, water filtration systems, because look, I'm not going to sit here and rely on someone else for my safety.
So were you worried like the food supplies would collapse and who knows, maybe a starving neighbor would break in and take your supplies?
At that point in time, people were so polarized. People were initiating violence against each other for not wearing masks, buying all the toilet paper, and then all the riots, right? Riots everywhere, especially when the George Floyd thing happened. So there was a lot of things that were very concerning to me.
Brandon was watching anti-vax documentaries, once produced in the wake of Judy Mikovits's Plandemic, and videos attacking Antifa, the loose collective of anti-fascists who had taken to the streets after George Floyd's murder. He started making his own Instagram videos.
I just got a new mag well for the Glock 17. See how smooth that mag well is? Nice and smooth for reloads. Oh yeah.
In the video, he has a scraggly red beard, those earrings that dramatically stretch a person's earlobes, and a look of pride as he shows off his gun.
She's looking pretty, man. She's good. She's good to go now.
So presumably you were doing all of this alone, but at some point you decided to try and find like-minded people.
Yes, I was in a private Facebook group. So I essentially posted, hey, is anyone down for training? Like, does anyone have property to train on? Like, what's going on? And Joe hit me up and he was like, hey, man, like, I got some property. And that's essentially how I got connected.
Joe was the 26-year-old Jon Ronson, the co-founder with his father-in-law of a local militia group, the Wolverine Watchmen. Michigan has dozens of militia groups. Most are considered by law enforcement to be pretty harmless, albeit secretive, gun clubs. But on the other hand, Timothy McVeigh drifted in and out of the Michigan militia shortly before he blew up a federal building in Oklahoma City in 1995, killing 168 people. Brandon took Joe up on his offer and drove to his house.
It was off one of those old curvy kind of country roads. I got there and there was like quite a lot of people there, probably like 30 people.
Dressed in camo and all of that stuff.
Yep, so everybody was geared up. Everyone had a rifle. I'm literally just a random guy and I'm showing up in this social dynamic and I don't know anybody.
This was June the 28th, 2020. They videoed themselves training, leaping out of cars, shooting and reloading.
You'd have your firearm down in the low ready position.
Keep moving.
And then they'd yell out a command or whatever.
Was it fun?
Oh yeah, it was so fun. It was really fun. I just wish we could have segued a lot faster between the things that we were doing.
So like there'd be like a few minutes of activity and then you'd have to sit around for ages before the next activity happened.
Right.
Like American football.
Yes, exactly.
Although according to neighbour Pam Karshnock, who was interviewed 4 months later by the local news channel Wood TV8, the activity actually sounded continuous and not like American football at all.
Beautiful country out here, and then all of a sudden, out of the peace and quiet, bam, 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 for hours.
It was fun, Brandon says, but also it wasn't fun because it could feel like he was the only one taking things seriously.
No one's talking about anything with substance. None of these guys have food stored. They're not philosophically armed.
But there was an exception. 35-year-old Big Dan Chappell. He had spent 5 years in the army, including 15 months in Iraq. He had seen combat and it showed.
You could immediately tell that Dan Chappell is the leader of this group, whether it's official or not. And I thought, okay, I could learn something from Dan Chappell.
So Brandon cultivated a relationship with Dan, which paid off when Dan announced that he had access to a training camp in Wisconsin with better facilities and he had the travel covered.
So I'm like, okay, cool. Dan Chappell drove all of us to Wisconsin. They had hanging steel targets. So I'm like, dude, heck yeah, like, let's go.
Brandon loved the new training camp, despite there being aspects of the layout that sound quite hazardous to me.
So at the front is where everyone's shooting, and then behind that is where all the kids were at and barbecue and stuff. They had like a birthday party there. They had a pool. They were playing in the pool.
Still, no one got shot, and at 2 a.m. the men all checked into a hotel together.
All of us slept in one room. I literally didn't sleep a wink. I was bummed, man. I didn't sleep at all.
Because you had to share a room with a whole load of men.
Right, and then they were snoring and stuff.
But Brandon did make a friend that night. Barry Croft, who always wore a tricorn hat like a soldier from the Revolutionary War.
So tell me, who is Barry? What do you do?
Well, I'm a gentleman from Delaware, a single father of 3 daughters, drive truck locally.
Here's Barry Croft being interviewed that same month, July 2020, on a YouTube channel for libertarians hosted by Bradley Bennett.
Basically just your everyday Joe, only I wear a tricorn hat because I feel like we've forgotten our past and our history.
But Barry was less polite, Brandon says, in informal settings, like after firearms practice.
He was like a cartoon character to me. He just would say the most offensive, vile stuff.
Who was he being vile about?
I mean, just talking crazy. And he'd be smoking weed. You know, if like China invaded America, we would talk about riding a crotch rocket, spraying napalm on the enemy. Barry's not going to actually formulate napalm and spray people and light them on fire. He's never going to do that. He's a truck driver.
Was there any race talk? Were people saying racist things?
No, we're not down with white supremacists. I mean, yeah, everyone in the group was white guys, right? But we're kind of talking about a militia. That's just kind of the style, I guess. It's not like black people aren't allowed.
Brandon trained with the others once a month that summer, and they talked a lot in encrypted group chats. And then it was October the 7th, 2020. Brandon was at work ordering a sandwich for dinner.
The sandwich was called the spicy Brando. It's a double cheeseburger with bacon, jalapeno, onion, and avocado.
So was it called Spicy Brando because your name's Brandon? Was it named after you?
Oh, yeah, it was me because I was like the only guy who thought of it, I guess.
All right, so you ordered your namesake sandwich. Then what happened?
My supervisor came up to me and he was like, hey, the plant manager wants to talk to you. So I leave my machine, and some of the rooms there, they have automatic lights. So I walk in this room and the light doesn't turn on. And I realize something's kind of suspicious, and I stop. In like a split second, out of nowhere, the lights flicked on and 15 guys just straight up tackled me down to the ground. And, stop resisting, put your hands behind your back, stop resisting.
This is what you'd been training for all of these months, and then when it happens, you blew it.
Yeah, they just grabbed me, dude, and I didn't even do anything.
You're thinking, oh, like all that time in Joe's garden was like wasted.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Brandon says he was dragged outside by the men, and that's when he realised that they were FBI.
So we got to the station, and they say, okay, well, you're being charged with conspiracy to kidnap the governor of Michigan.
Breaking news on 7 Action News at 4.
Last night, the FBI
And Michigan State Police arrested 6 individuals with conspiring to kidnap the governor of Michigan.
Governor Whitmer has been the target of protests since last spring over restrictions aimed to stop the spread of COVID.
They allegedly wanted to take her to a secret location in Wisconsin for a trial that would end in execution.
I'm absolutely stunned. I'm like, say that again? Yeah, conspiring to kidnap the governor of Michigan.
And had you been in any conversation where the subject of kidnapping the governor of Michigan had come up?
There was totally conversation about arresting politicians. Yeah, so at trainings and stuff, there was people like, dude, they need to be arrested. Mainly Adam, he's like, she needs to be arrested. He was really kind of focused on her for some reason.
Adam being Adam Fox, an adherent of the Boogaloo movement. Boogaloo being their word for a new civil war. The men, although not Brandon, sometimes met at Adam's home, which was a room in the basement of a vacuum repair shop where they said terrible things to each other, as did Brandon in their group chats.
I said some pretty offensive things.
I can tell you exactly what Brandon said, because...
What they didn't know, an undercover informant had already infiltrated them.
In fact, undercover informants had been recording everything the whole time Brandon was in the group. Which is how we know that Brandon told the others, quote, any lawyer that supports a vaccine mandate, decapitate them in their own home. Plus he talked about, quote, wanting Zionist banker blood and buildings that manufacture vaccines, blow them up. I'm not even kidding.
We're not talking plans. This is just a conversation. Well, she needs to be held accountable or whatever and blah, blah. This is a hypothetical scenario. This isn't something I'm dead serious about. This is nothing I ever planned. It's funny, dude. It's funny. It's fun to blow stuff up. It's fun to shoot guns. It's fun to say ridiculous, offensive shit. And if it offends you, so what? I don't care about your feelings and how you feel about words. Sorry.
So I was in my office, and I remember one of the folks who worked with me coming to tell me that the FBI had developed some evidence that some people were plotting to kidnap Governor Whitmer.
Here's Matthew Schneider again, the former U.S. attorney for Eastern Michigan.
I did listen to the undercover recordings, and I had mixed reactions. The defendants talked about doing crazy things, like they would go to the governor's house and they would hide outside and they would make animal noises, and then that would cause the governor to come outside. Or they would capture the governor, they would tie balloons to her, and they would float her over Lake Michigan.
I mean, that does sound like stoned basement of a vacuum repair store talk.
While they were saying these things, they were laughing. And people don't really seriously make a plot to murder someone and joke around about that and laugh.
It was ambiguous. From the beginning, law enforcement had been split over when or even if to arrest the men. When does crazy talk tip into actual planning? But then again, some of the talk hadn't sounded crazy. Here's a report from the local news channel WDIV.
Alleged Whitmer plot ringleader Barry Croft did not know the FBI put a recording device on an informant. Every word of the meeting could be heard perfectly. Croft was emotional, almost to the point of tears, when he told the group that he was a terrorist and his target were politicians and police who he hated. He said, quote, I want to hurt people. I want to burn houses down and blow things up. Burn a family to the ground. I'm going to do it. Murder and killing. Croft went on telling the group, quote, I might murder a cop, put his uniform on and murder feds. I am not being hypothetical.
The FBI says Barry Croft can be heard on tape telling his daughter he can't eat dinner because he's making explosives.
Brandon and the other men had said some of the most violent things imaginable. But in the days after their arrests, a narrative began to form, spread by politicians and academics on the left, that seemed to go beyond the facts of the case. It was that they were even more dangerous than they seemed, and in a very specific way, as laid out by Governor Whitmer herself.
Just last week, the President of the United States stood before the American people and refused to condemn white supremacists and hate groups like these two Michigan militia groups who are preparing to kidnap and possibly kill me.
The people that we charged are affiliated with this Wolverine Watchman group.
And here's Michigan's Attorney General, Dana Nessel.
But there are multiple white supremacy groups and militia groups that have been acting in accordance with one another. And, ultimately, their mission is what they call the Boogaloo, an uprising or a civil war.
Prosecutors were saying that far from being a disorganised collective, Brandon and the others were a coordinated conspiracy of white supremacists intent on kickstarting civil war. Brandon was taken to jail to await trial.
For probably 8 months, I was in a pod with all black dudes.
And the news reporting was calling you a white supremacist.
Right. Absolutely.
Were you thinking, I hope they don't see the papers?
No, honestly, they thought I was a badass. Dude, I still talk to 4 dudes from there. I talk to my homeboy Day once a week, twice a week. Look, you can even ask them. They said, but you're the realest white boy I know, man.
This call is from a federal prison.
Hi, is that Day?
Yeah, this is me.
Hey, how you doing? It's John.
I'm all right. I'm doing all right today, John. How are you?
I did want to follow up on Brandon's suggestion that I contact Day for a character reference, because while there are disturbing aspects of Brandon's behaviour, if he isn't motivated by white supremacy, I'm curious as to why there's such a drive to say that he was. Day is currently in a noisy prison, serving 4 years.
I was arrested on burglary charges and a drug charge.
He says that he and Brandon, who he calls B, bonded over the TV show Ancient Aliens.
I'm this is one of my favorite shows, but nobody else in the cell was really interested in it. But me and B always get right up close to the TV, watching it and talking about different theories and some of our ideas about how the world is.
And there was no indication of him saying anything racist or believing anything racist?
No, never. But he looks a little rough around the edges, but once you talk to him, he's one of the most kind-hearted, sweetest guys ever.
Much later, Day says, Brandon did something unexpected.
Days later, my girlfriend hit me up some white guy just messaged me on Snapchat. I'm white guy? What are you talking about? She said his name was B. He sent my girlfriend $60 because you know how hard it is to survive in that county. I didn't even ask him for it. He just really did it out the corner of his heart.
Day says that $60 wasn't the only time Brandon unexpectedly put money into his account. He's done it a bunch of times. Also, it turns out that another of the arrested men, Daniel Harris, had attended a Black Lives Matter protest after George Floyd's murder, not protesting BLM, but in support of them. And here's Barry Croft on YouTube in the summer of 2020, a few months before his arrest.
That's one of the beauties about being from Delaware. I rub shoulders and elbows with every race, creed, culture, and religion. I get along with all these people. They want you to think that we're so close to killing each other, we can't stand each other. But the reality is they're spinning all that.
Of course, white supremacists often pretend not to be. Plus, 14 men were eventually arrested in connection with the plot. 6, including Brandon, on federal charges and the others on state charges, and it's quite possible that some of them were racist. I'm going to take you out of Brandon's story for a moment to try and figure out this mystery. Why is it so widely assumed that they were motivated by white supremacy? I think one big reason why is because of the work of an important academic, Dr. Barbara F. Walter. Here she is talking to the New Yorker's David Remnick in 2022.
Back in 2017, I was invited to be on a task force run by the U.S. government, and it's called the Political Instability Task Force.
This is a CIA effort?
Yeah, it's a CIA effort.
Dr. Walter's task force was charged with figuring out how overseas countries like the former Yugoslavia collapse into civil war. They concluded that when democracies become fragile, civil wars organise, quote, almost exclusively around ethnic, religious or racial identity.
We call those ethnic factions.
Because her task force was CIA funded, they were forbidden from studying polarisation in the US. But still, she wanted to write a book warning that civil war might be imminent in America. Which is where Brandon comes in. Her book, How Civil Wars Start, warns of white power groups plotting to overthrow the country. And it starts with the story of Brandon and the kidnap plot.
Your book begins with a very dramatic moment. A group of right-wing radicals, white supremacists, they were hatching a plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan. You clearly begin your book with that incident as a kind of harbinger of many such incidents that could be in the offing.
Yeah, what I see happening is what we've seen happening in other countries. We know that the groups that tend to start civil wars are the groups that were once dominant but are in decline.
And in America, she says, that group in decline is the white working class with no college education, men like Brandon.
The CIA is legally not allowed to look at the United States. So this was my own personal decision that here I am, I've studied civil wars for 30 years, I'm on this task force, I know about this model, and this is information that I thought the American public should have.
And so, as Dr. Walter herself says, the idea that America may soon be engulfed by a civil war comes from a data model, from research conducted overseas, and not from actual research into Americans like Brandon. Anyway, back to Brandon's story. His court case took 17 months to come to trial, not least because of the ambiguities. When does violent talk become actual plotting? During that time, 2 of the arrested men took plea deals and became state witnesses, and Brandon was put in a cell with some of the others, including Barry Croft, who wouldn't stop talking.
Just talking and talking and talking, and I'm just laying on my bunk, dude. And he just never stopped. He talked to me for like an hour and a half straight. And when he was finally done, I said, dude, that's kind of the whole reason why we're here, right? It's talking too much, dude. Like, relax. He said, oh, damn, you're right, bro.
The prosecution, meanwhile, were developing their case about how it wasn't just talk. Like how, one night,
they actually did go to the governor's lake house and they scoped it out. They actually did go to the bridge where law enforcement would have to cross, and they looked under it to see if they could plant a bomb there. And they actually did try to gather money to buy that bomb.
That's Matthew, the former attorney for Eastern Michigan. He doesn't mean Brandon. Brandon did train with Barry Croft and Adam Fox and some of the others that same weekend, but he didn't join them on their drive to scope out the governor's lake house with night vision goggles.
These night vision goggles are not cheap. These are expensive items. It's not like they just went to the corner grocery store and bought some binoculars. They spent money on sophisticated equipment.
But for every piece of damning evidence, some other evidence would come along to make everything ambiguous again.
If you listen to the audio, if they ever talk about grabbing politicians or anything like that, it's always with Dan Chappell.
Dan Chappell, the Iraq War veteran who had driven them all to Wisconsin and paid for everything.
New details are emerging about the FBI's involvement in this plot. 12 confidential FBI informants, 12, assisted in this investigation. They took leading roles in the scheme. This Iraq War veteran, he was an informant. He became second in command there. And this longtime government informant from Wisconsin actually paid for the hotel rooms and for dinners just to get people to join this alleged plot.
As you really read into the case, it seems like the 4 people who were put on trial were too stoned and dumb to do just about anything but for this FBI informant who egged things on.
These guys might be morons. We can absolutely strongly object to the things they said, but they were not about to pull off the heist of the century. They were at no point anywhere near doing that.
Brandon and the others were winning over the right-wing media, like Fox News. But could they win over the jury?
The waiting time for the verdict was insane. You're in the cell waiting for other people to choose whether or not you have a life. So I went crazy. It was 5 days. And yes, we sat down and they started to read off the verdicts.
So Adam Fox...
They couldn't agree. It was a hung jury.
And Barry Croft?
Same thing, hung jury. They couldn't agree on him.
And then it came to Brandon's verdict.
Oh, man, I'm about to cry right now. I almost feel like it. There was just this gasp in the court. I looked at the jury and just mouthed to them, "I love you."
First tonight at 11, the jury has spoken, and it's not what the government wanted to hear.
Brandon Concert of Canton and Daniel Harris of Lake Orion both found not guilty.
And it's a mistrial for Adam Fox of Grand Rapids and Barry Croft of Delaware after the jury deadlocked. The alleged ringleaders face a new trial.
Which happened 4 months later, and this time...
Unfortunately, they got convicted of all charges.
In December 2022, Adam Fox was sentenced to 16 years and Barry Croft to 19 years and 7 months, which means that in the federal cases there were 2 convictions, 2 plea deals and 2 acquittals, a messy conclusion to an ambiguous case, a verdict that didn't fully satisfy anyone. For Brandon,
Adam and Barry are not leaders of a dark, secret, conspiratorial organization who plan to kidnap a sitting governor. Adam is a bum who smokes weed in the basement of a vacuum repair shop. You know, really, it's like preying on a mentally disabled person.
Whereas for Matthew, the attorney for Eastern Michigan,
I believe it was a genuine and a serious plot. I don't think this case was going away. It was only getting worse.
I think this was a story of 2 culture wars colliding with each other. The state can't tell us what to do versus there's a white power civil war brewing and we need to stop it. Despite the messiness of the kidnap case, one lesson feels clear. The more we demonise the other side, the more chance that civil war becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Next time on Things Fell Apart, the story of how a difficult relationship between a mother and her child that fell apart during lockdown was inflamed by politicians and journalists, powerful culture warriors with vested interests.
Some of the people at school decided that her daughter was really a boy and wanted to identify as a boy. So they changed her name, they changed her, quote, pronouns, they did these things without telling the mother.
Things Fell Apart was written and presented by me, Jon Ronson, and produced by Sarah Shebbier. The music was composed by Phil Channel. The programme was mixed by Giles Aspen. The editor was Philip Sellers and the commissioning editor was Dan Clark. It's a BBC audio production for BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.